Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, edited and mildly modernized by Hal M. Helms. This recording of Pilgrim's Progress was reproduced and recorded by Christians Listening in 1989 through an agreement with the publisher Paraclete Press, who holds all copyrights. It is complete and unabridged and contains the author's apology, a personal word from the editor, an introduction, 20 chapters, and 266 pages. Neither this recording nor any part therein may be reproduced, duplicated, or used for any purpose without the written permission of Christians Listening. Your reader is Stuart Spencer. And now, Pilgrim's Progress, Tape 1, Side A. A personal word from the editor. One of the first books added to my fledgling ministerial library was a copy of the Pilgrim's Progress. It still holds an honored place among the books I would not want to be without. I had first become acquainted with it through a slide presentation 2 or 3 years after my conversion. It made an indelible impression on me, as it has on millions of others through the centuries. Written in the 17th century, many of the words and expressions which were in common use in those days sound strange to our ears. Some of them have become so unused that we must keep a dictionary handy in order to get the real point of what the author is saying. I found as I worked with this book, the dictionary had always to be very close indeed, and it did not seem presumptuous to think that other readers might have that same difficulty. There was another feature of Bunyan's original work which always gave me a little difficulty. That was the style, which on the page looked more like a play than a story. In the present edition I have used the more familiar narrative form. But even so, it seemed important to keep as much of the flavor of the 17th century original as possible, because therein lies part of its perennial charm. Some of the conversation will sound stiff to modern ears, but apparently did not seem so to earlier generations. It is well that we not lose that contact with our forebears. This edition and revision is not designed to take the place of the original. Like the King James Version of the Bible, it deserves to be preserved, read, and treasured for its own unique beauty. But just as we find a modern revision or translation of the Bible helpful in throwing additional light on the Scriptures, so I hope this revision will serve as a means of making Bunyan's message clearer and more enjoyable to many fellow pilgrims. The illustrations in this edition are taken from a beautifully preserved edition published in 1861 in London. A friend of mine, John Roberts, owns the book and kindly made it available to us. It bears in finely written script this dedication in front. W.T. Back, presented to him by his parents on his 8th birthday, October 20th, 1862. We have chosen to use these beautiful engravings both because of their intrinsic worth and because we believe they help to preserve some of the charm and beauty of the 17th century story. Signed, Hal M. Helms. Introduction. The Pilgrim's Progress occupies an unrivaled place in the world's religious literature. For several centuries, its popularity was second only to the Bible in England, and it has been called the most characteristic expression of the Puritan religious outlook. John Bunyan was born in 1628 in an age of religious ferment and persecution. The struggle between the parliamentary forces and the English crown eventually became a civil war, with the king losing his head, and England, for a brief time, becoming a republic under Parliament and Oliver Cromwell. Of the religious intolerance of this time, one writer says, "Laymen and clergymen renowned for learning and piety, for opposing the views of the king's court, had their ears cut off, noses slit, faces branded with red-hot irons, were publicly whipped on the naked body, every lash bringing away the flesh, and then imprisoned with such cruelties that when released they could neither see, hear, nor walk." Born in the village of Elstow, about a mile from Bedford, Bunyan was the son of poor parents. Bunyan writes, "I am thine, if thou be not ashamed to own me, because of my low and contemptible descent in the world. But he goes on to say, the poor Christian has something to answer them that reproach him for his ignoble pedigree. True, may that man say, I am taken out of the dunghill, but I fear God. This is the highest and most noble. He, the honor, the life, and the glory that is lasting. Sent for a short period to school as a boy, he tells us that he learned little and soon forgot most of that. He was quickly attracted to evil associates, the rowdy element in the school and town, and in time became a ringleader among them. It was my delight, he writes, to be taken captive by the devil at his will, being filled with all unrighteousness, that from a child I had but few equals, both for cursing, lying, and blaspheming the name of God. In 1644, when he was 16 years old, Bunyan was mustered into the Parliamentary Army, where he remained until July 1647. Although still unconverted and living a life of sinful rebellion, Bunyan was in touch with many men of strong religious convictions in Cromwell's army, and seeds were doubtless planted in his heart to bear fruit in later life. Soon after his discharge from the army, Bunyan married a poor but godly young woman who brought with her 2 books, The Plain Man's Pathway to Heaven and The Practice of Piety. Encouraged by his wife to read these books, Bunyan began to recover his reading ability, which he had almost lost. Still he persisted in his old ways until a loose and ungodly wretch, hearing his oaths, told him that his language made her tremble, and that he was able to spoil all the youth in the town. He was stricken by this remark, and determined to reform. About the same time, the church bells in Elstow were being used both to announce the morning services and the afternoon football games on the common, although Sunday sports were considered sinful. As they were being rung one Sunday afternoon, a bolt of lightning entered the belfry and killed both the ringers. Soon Bunyan began to shun the Sunday sports he had loved so much. He and his wife were still attending the parish church, and their first 2 children were baptized in it. But by this time the Book of Common Prayer had been replaced by the Presbyterian Directory to guide the public worship. Bunyan became proud of his reformation and later admitted that at this time he was feeding God with chapters and prayers and promises and vows and a great many more such dainty dishes, thinking that he was now serving God, but later feeling that he had only got into a cleaner way to hell than the rest of his neighbors. It was while he was engaged in his trade as a tinker or brazier at Bedford that he overheard the conversation of some women who were talking of spiritual things. He was humbled and alarmed because he did not understand what they were talking about. They were talking about a new birth, the work of God in their hearts. Also, they were convinced of their miserable state by nature. They talked how God had visited their souls with his love in the Lord Jesus. They also discoursed of their own wretchedness of heart, of their unbelief, and did contemn, slight, and abhor their own righteousness as insufficient to do them any good. And, methought, he goes on, they spake as if joy did make them speak. They spake with such pleasantness of Scripture language, and with such appearance of grace in all they said, that they were to me as if they had found a new world, as if they were people that dwelt alone, and were not to be reckoned among their neighbors. Their talk and discourse went with me. Also my heart would tarry with them, for I was greatly affected with their words, both because by them I was convinced that I wanted the true tokens of a truly godly man, and also because by them I was convinced of the happy and blessed condition of him that was such a one. Then ensued a period of great spiritual turmoil, terror, conviction of sin, struggle, even despair. Through this struggle, Bunyan became completely convinced of his lostness and need of salvation through Jesus Christ. He began to attend the meeting of a small group of open Baptists in the town of Bedford, where he was much influenced by the preaching of John Gifford, their pastor. With his counsel and help, Bunyan began to find the release of spirit and the joy of knowing his sins had been forgiven. Into this church fellowship, Bunyan was admitted after proper inquiries had been made concerning his spiritual state, and after he had received baptism by immersion. His baptism was administered in all probability, as was then usual, at midnight, to avoid the persecution which then raged against the Baptists. But Bunyan's path was not to be a smooth and untrammeled one. He still faced many agonies, doubts, fears, and questions, as we find reflected in the story of Christian, faithful, and hopeful as they journeyed to the celestial city. 2 years after joining the Baptist Church, at the suggestion of some of the most able of the saints, Bunyan began to preach. His preaching was remarkably effective because he spoke out of the fires of his own experience and the working of God within his soul. The success of his preaching caused the Anglican divines to rise up in opposition to him, as did also the Quakers, who at that time vied with the Baptists for the allegiance of the mechanics and tradesmen, many of whom did not feel spiritually at home in the state church. In 1655, his first wife died, leaving him with 4 small children. Soon afterward, he married his second wife, Elizabeth, who proved herself to be a most devoted wife and heroic woman. 2 children were born of this marriage. In 1660, shortly after the restoration of the monarchy under Charles II, the 20 years of freedom the separated churches had enjoyed came to an end. Bunyan was arrested for preaching. He would neither agree to stop preaching, nor would he flee, and so was lodged in jail, with the exception of a few weeks' liberty in 1666, for the next 12 years. Even so, his fate was not so severe as others who were hanged for similar crimes. He had been in prison for about 7 weeks when he was carried before Justice Keeling, who began to argue with Bunyan concerning the virtues of the Book of Common Prayer, asserting that he knew it had been in use ever since the Apostles' time. Bunyan replied that the prayer must be the outpouring of the heart, and not the reading of form. At length the judge demanded to know how he pled, and whether he confessed the indictment. Not until that moment did Bunyan know that he had been indicted. He confessed that he had gone to meetings with other Christians, that they had prayed together, exhorted one another, and that we had the sweet, comforting presence of the Lord for our encouragement. Blessed be his name, therefore. I confessed myself guilty, no otherwise. The judge entered the plea of guilty and pronounced sentence. You must go back again to prison and there lie for 3 months, and then if you do not submit to go to church to hear divine service and leave your preaching, you must be banished the realm, and after that, if you shall be found in this realm without special license from the king, you must stretch by the neck for it, I tell you plainly. With that the judge ordered the jailer to take him away. I am at a point with you, Bunyan replied to the judge. If I were out of prison today, I would preach the gospel again tomorrow by the help of God. It broke Bunyan's heart to see his family in such straits. His heart was especially burdened for his oldest daughter, Mary, who had been born blind. Oh, the thoughts of the hardships I thought my poor blind one might go under would break my heart in pieces, he wrote later. His family was supported as much as he was able by his own work in prison, and a fellow prisoner told later of having watched Bunyan make many 100 gross of long tag lace. But his family was forced nonetheless to receive charity of friends. As the years went on, and Bunyan continued to earn the admiration and respect even of those who disagreed with his religious views by his exemplary conduct and obvious sincerity, he was allowed to leave jail to preach at the local church, and once, going as far as London. In May 1672 he was granted a license to preach by the king, having been formally called to become pastor of the church at Bedford. In the city of Leicester, the record shows the following. John Bunyan's license bears the date 15th of May 1672 to teach as a congregational person, being of that persuasion, in the house of Josias Rufford, Bedford, or in any other place, room, or house licensed by His Majesty's memorand. The said Bunyan showed his license to Mr. Mayor, Mr. Overinge, Mr. Freeman, and Mr. Brown, being then present, the 6th day of October, 1672. The years in jail had not all been spent in making long laces. His reading had included the Bible and Fox's Book of Martyrs, a very popular account of the Christian martyrs with an especially anti-Catholic bent. In prison he had written The Holy City, Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners, his autobiography, Christian Behavior, and the Resurrection of the Dead. There has been some question as to whether he wrote The Pilgrim's Progress during his 12-year imprisonment or during a 6-month imprisonment he suffered when persecution arose again in 1677. The first publication of The Pilgrim's Progress was in 1678, but the vividness of its descriptions of spiritual struggles and the recorded testimony of a fellow prisoner would make it seem likely that it was written during his long sojourn in prison, but kept unpublished until Bunyan was convinced that people would be helped by it. In his introductory poem, he makes reference to the fact that some advised publish, while others thought it too frivolous to be helpful. On becoming pastor of the Bedford congregation, Bunyan quickly earned the nickname Bishop Bunyan because of his pastoral zeal and his attractive preaching. For the next 16 years, he labored tirelessly among the believers in the Bedfordshire and the East Anglia area, at times preaching in London. He vigorously defended the practice of open communion against those strict Baptists who would admit none to the Lord's table except those of their own persuasion. Among his later literary works are The Holy War, The Life and Death of Mr. Badman, a book for boys and girls, and The Pilgrim's Progress second part, which tells the story of Christiana, Christian's wife, her children and friends, as they went on pilgrimage to the Celestial City. In August 1688, Bunyan was on a preaching visit to London and was asked to ride out through a heavy rain to Reading to help settle a quarrel between a father and his son. On returning to London, Bunyan contracted a fever and died August 31st. He is buried in Bunhill Field, the nonconformist burial ground in London. Who would true valor see? Let him come hither. One here will constant be. Come wind, come weather, there's no discouragement shall make him once relent his first avowed intent to be a pilgrim. Whoso beset him round with dismal stories do but themselves confound. His strength the more is, no lion can him fright. He'll with a giant fight, but he will have a right to be a pilgrim. Hobgoblin nor foul fiend can daunt his spirit. He knew he at the end shall life inherit. Then fancies fly away. He'll fear not what men say. He'll labor night and day to be a pilgrim. Chapter 1. Fleeing the City of Destruction. As I walked through the wilderness of this world, I lighted on a certain place where there was a den, and I lay down there to sleep. As I slept, I dreamed a dream. Behold, I saw a man, clothed with rags, standing with his face looking away from his own house, a book in his hand, and a great burden on his back. As I looked, he opened the book, and read in it, and as he read, he wept and trembled. Not being able to contain himself any longer, he began to weep, saying, "What shall I do?" In this same condition he turned and went back to his home, trying as best he could to keep his wife and children from seeing his distress. He could not be silent long, however, because his troubles seemed to increase. At length he began to share with his wife and children what was in his mind. "Oh, my dear wife, and you, the children I love, I am undone by this burden that lies so heavy on my back. And more than this, I am told that our city is going to be burned with fire from heaven, and that both you and myself will come to ruin unless some way can be found for us to escape. I haven't found the way yet." His family was amazed and did not believe that what he said was true. They thought that some madness had seized him. Hoping that sleep would settle his mind, they hurried him off to bed. But the night was as troublesome to him as the day, and instead of sleeping he spent the night in sighs and tears. When the morning came, his family wanted to know how he was. "Worse and worse," he said. He began talking to them again about his burden and his fears, but they would hear none of it. Their hearts were hardening, and they hoped by such things as harsh words they could jolt this foolishness out of him. Sometimes they would make fun of him, sometimes they would chide him, sometimes neglect him. So he began to spend more time in his own room, where he would pray for them and would grieve over his own misery. At times he would walk out in the countryside, sometimes he would read, sometimes pray. Days passed. Then I saw him walking in the fields, reading his book, as he liked to do, and as he read he burst out as he had done at the beginning, crying, "What shall I do to be saved?" He looked this way and that, as if he wanted to run, yet he stood still because, as I understood, he could not tell which way to go. Then I saw a man named Evangelist, who came to him and asked, "Why are you crying?" The man answered, "Sir, I understand by this book in my hand that I am condemned to die, and after that to come to judgment. I find that I am not willing to die, and am not ready to come to judgment." Evangelist said, "Why are you not willing to die, since this life contains so many evils?" The man answered, "Because I fear that this burden on my back will sink me lower than the grave, and I will fall into the depths of hell. And, sir, if I am not fit to go to prison, I am not fit to go to judgment, and from thence to be executed, and the thought of these things makes me cry." Then said the evangelist, "If this is your condition, why do you stand still?" "Because I do not know where to go," he answered. Then Evangelist gave him a parchment roll on which were written the words, "Flee from the wrath to come." The man therefore read it, and looking at Evangelist very carefully asked, "Which way must I flee?" Evangelist pointed with his finger over a very wide space and asked, "Do you see that narrow gate yonder?" The man said, "No." "Do you see yonder shining light?" Evangelist asked. "I think I do," the man replied. Evangelist continued, "Keep that light in your eye and go directly to it. In this way you will see the gate. When you knock at the gate, you will be told what to do." So I saw in my dream that the man began to run. Now he had not run far from his own door when his wife and children, perceiving that he was leaving, began to call to him to return. But the man put his fingers in his ears and ran on, crying, "Life, life, eternal life." So he looked not behind him, but ran toward the middle of the plain. Chapter 2. Christian and Pliable. The neighbors also came out to see the man run, and as he ran, some mocked, others threatened, and some cried after him to return. Among those who came out, 2 were resolved to bring him back, by force if necessary. The name of one was Obstinate, the name of the other Pliable. By this time the man had gotten a good distance ahead of them. As they pursued him, however, they shortly overtook him, And he turned to them, asking, "Neighbors, why are you coming after me?" "To persuade you to come back with us," they answered. The man replied, "That can by no means be. You dwell in the city of destruction, the place where I also was born. I see now that it is indeed the city of destruction, and dying there, sooner or later you will sink lower than the grave into a place that burns with fire and brimstone. So, good neighbors, be content, and go along with me." "What?" said Obstinate, "and leave our friends and comforts behind us?" "Yes," said Christian, for that was his name, "for all you forsake is not worthy to be compared with a little of what I am seeking to enjoy. If you would go along with me and hold it, you shall fare as I myself, for where I am going there is enough and to spare. Come then, and prove my words." "What are the things you seek, since you leave all the world behind?" asked Obstinate. "I seek," said Christian, "an inheritance incorruptible, undefiled, that fades not away, one that is laid up in heaven and is safe there, to be bestowed at the time appointed on those who diligently seek it. Read it so, if you will, in my book." "Tush," said Obstinate, "away with your book. Will you go back with us or not?" "No, not I," said the other, "because I have put my hand to the plow." Obstinate turned to Pliable and said, "Come then, neighbor Pliable, let us turn back and go home without him. There is a company of these crazy-headed fools who are wiser in their own eyes than 7 men who can reason with them." Pliable said, "Don't revile. If what the good Christian says is true, the things he looks for are better than ours. My heart inclines to go with my neighbor." "What? More fools still?" snorted Obstinate. "Listen to me and go back. Who knows where such a muddle-headed fellow as this will lead you? Go back, and be wise." Christian then exclaimed, "Nay, come with me, Pliable. There are such things to be had which I spoke of, and many more glorious ones besides. If you can't believe me, here, read it in this book. The truth of what is written in it is all confirmed by the blood of him who made it." "Well, neighbor Obstinate," said Pliable, "I begin to come to a decision. I'm going along with this good man. But, my good companion, do you know the way to this desired place?" "I am directed by a man whose name is Evangelist," replied Christian, "to speed to a little narrow gate that lies before us, where we will receive instructions about the way." "Come then, good neighbor," answered Pliable, "let us be going." So they both went along together. "And I will go back to my place," shouted Obstinate over his shoulder. "I will be no companion of such misled, fanatical fellows." I saw in my dream that when Obstinate left, Christian and Pliable went walking over the plain, talking together as they went. "Come, neighbor Pliable, how are you doing? I am glad you were persuaded to come along with me. Had even Obstinate himself but felt what I have felt of the powers and terrors of what is yet unseen, he would not so lightly have turned his back on us." Pliable replied, "My good neighbor, since there are only the 2 of us here, tell me now further about the wonderful things where we are going." "I can better conceive them in my mind than I can put them into words," answered his companion. "But since you desire to know, I will read of them in my book." "And do you think that the words of your book are certainly true?" asked Pliable. "Yes, verily," Christian avowed. "This book was made by him who cannot lie." "Well said. What wonderful things are they?" "There is an endless kingdom to be inhabited, and everlasting life to be given us, that we may inhabit the kingdom forever." "Well said, and what else?" "There are crowns of glory to be given us, and garments that will make us shine like the sun in the heavens." "This is very pleasant," continued Pliable. "And what else?" "There shall be no more crying nor sorrow, for he who is the owner of the place will wipe away all tears from our eyes." "And what company shall we have there?" asked Pliable. "There we shall be with seraphim and cherubim," answered Christian, "creatures that shall dazzle your eyes to look on them. There also you will meet with thousands and 10,000s who have gone before us to that place. None of them are hurtful, but all are loving and holy. Everyone is walking in the sight of God, standing in his presence forever. In a word, we shall see the elders and their golden crowns. There we shall see the holy virgins with their golden harps. There we shall see men who were cut in pieces by the world, burnt in flames, eaten by beasts, drowned in the seas, all for the love they bear to the Lord of that place. They will all be well and clothed with immortality as with a garment." "Hearing this is enough to ravish one's heart," exclaimed Pliable. "But are these things to be enjoyed? How shall we get to be sharers of them?" "The Lord, the governor of that country, has recorded all in this book," Christian went on. "The substance of it is this: if we are truly willing to have it, he will bestow it upon us freely." "Well, my good companion, I'm glad to hear of these things. Come on, let's increase our pace." Christian replied sadly, "I cannot go so fast as I would because of this burden on my back." I saw in my dream that just as they ended this talk, they came to a very miry swamp in the middle of the plain. Not noticing it, they both fell suddenly into it. It is called the Slough of Despond. Here they wallowed for a time and were grievously covered with dirt and mud. Christian, because of the burden on his back, began to sink in the mire. Then Pliable called out, "Ah, neighbor Christian, where are you now?" "Truly," said Christian, "I do not know." At this, Pliable became offended and angrily said to his fellow, "Is this the happiness you told me of all this while? If we have such ill speed at the beginning of our journey, what can we expect between this and our journey's end? If I get out of this mire alive, you shall possess the brave country alone for me." And with that he gave a desperate struggle or two and got out of the mire on that side of the swamp nearest his own house. Away he went, and Christian saw no more of him. Christian then was left to tumble in the Slough of Despond alone. Still he endeavored to struggle to that side of the slough farthest from his own house, toward the narrow gate. Yet he could not get out of the mire because of the great burden on his back. But I beheld in my dream that a man came to him whose name was Help, and asked him what he did there. "Sir," said Christian, "I was told to go this way by a man called Evangelist, who directed me to yonder gate, that I might escape the wrath to come. As I was going, I fell in here." "But why did you not look for the steps?" asked the other. "Fear followed me so hard," said Christian, "that I fled heedlessly and fell in." Then said he, "Give me your hand." So he gave him his hand, and he pulled him out and set him upon sound ground, and bid him go on his way. I stepped then to the one who had pulled Christian out and asked him, "Sir, since this is the route from the city of destruction to that gate yonder, why is it that this area is not mended, so that poor travelers might go over it more safely?" He replied, "This miry slough is such a place as cannot be mended. It is the descent where the scum and filth that attend conviction of sin continually run, and therefore it is called the Slough of Despond. For still, as the sinner is awakened by his lost condition, there arise in his soul many fears and doubts and discouraging apprehensions. All of them get together and settle in this place. This is the reason for the badness of the ground. It is not the pleasure of the king that this place should remain so bad," he went on. "His laborers also have, by the direction of his Majesty's surveyors, been for about these 1600 years employed about this patch of ground in case it might be able to be mended. Yes, and to my knowledge, said he, there have been swallowed up at least 20,000 cartloads, yea, millions of wholesome instructions that have at all seasons been brought from all places of the king's dominions. And they who can tell say they are the best materials to make good ground out of the place, in hopes that it might have been mended. But it is the Slough of Despond still, and so will be when they have done all they can. True, he went on, there are, by the direction of the lawgiver, certain good and substantial steps placed even through the very middle of the slough. But at such times as this place spews out its filth, as it does upon any change of weather, these steps are hardly seen, and even if they are, men, through the dizziness of their heads, miss them, and fall into the mire, even though the steps are there. But the ground is good when they have gotten in at the gate. Now I saw in my dreams that by this time Pliable had arrived back at his home. His neighbors came to visit him, and some of them called him a wise man for coming back, while others called him a fool for endangering himself with Christian in the first place. Others mocked his cowardliness, saying, "Surely since you began to venture, I would not have been so base as to quit because of a few difficulties." So Pliable sat shamefacedly among them. But after a while he regained his confidence, and then they all began to deride poor Christian behind his back. So much for Pliable. Chapter 3. A Dangerous Encounter. As Christian was walking along by himself, he spied someone afar off coming across the field to meet him. It happened that they met just as their paths crossed one another. The gentleman's name was Mr. Worldly Wiseman, and he dwelt in the town of Carnal Policy, a very great town, not far from the one from which Christian came. Christian's setting forth from the city of destruction had been noised abroad, so that Mr. Worldly Wiseman had heard of him and his journey. Observing Christian's laborious efforts, hearing his sighs and groans and the like, he spoke to him in this manner, "How now, good fellow, whither away after this burdened manner?" "A burdened manner indeed, as ever I think any poor creature had," was Christian's response. "And since you ask me whither away, I tell you, sir, I'm going to that narrow gate yonder, where I have been informed I shall be enabled to get rid of my heavy burden." "Do you have a wife and children?" asked the other. "Yes," said Christian, "but I am so laden with this burden that I cannot take pleasure in them as I formerly did. I think I am as though I had none." Mr. Worldly Wiseman looked at him shrewdly, saying, "Will you listen to me if I give you counsel?" "If it is good, I will," said Christian, "for I stand in need of good counsel." "I would advise you, then, with all speed to rid yourself of this burden. You will never be settled in your mind until then, nor can you enjoy the blessings God has bestowed on you till then." Christian answered, "That is what I look for, even to be rid of this heavy burden, but I cannot get it off myself, nor is there any man in our country that can take it off my shoulders. I am going this way, as I told you, in order to be rid of my burden." "Who bid you go this way to be rid of your burden?" asked the other. "A man who appeared to me to be a very great and honorable person. His name, as I remember, is Evangelist." "I curse him for his counsel," exclaimed Worldly Wiseman. "There is not a more dangerous and troublesome way in the world than that to which he has directed you. You will find it to be so if you follow his counsel. I perceive you have already met with something, for I see the dirt of the Slough of Despond is on you. But that slough is only the beginning of sorrows that accompany those who go in that way. Hear me, for I am older and wiser than you. In this way you are on, you are likely to meet with wearisomeness, painfulness, hunger, perils, nakedness, sword, lions, dragons, darkness, and in a word death and what not. These things are certainly true, and have been confirmed by many testimonies. Why should a man so carelessly cast himself away by giving heed to a stranger? Why, sir, replied Christian, this burden upon my back is more terrible to me than all those things you have mentioned. No, I think I do not care what I meet with in the way, if only I can also meet with deliverance from my burden. How did you come by the burden in the first place? Asked the other. By reading this book in my hand, said Christian. I thought so, retorted Worldly Wise Man. And it has happened to you just as it has to other weak men who meddle in things too high for them. They suddenly fall into the same distractions as you have done, distractions that not only unman men, but run them upon desperate ventures to obtain they know not what. I know what I would obtain, Christian rejoined. I would obtain ease from my heavy burden. But why would you seek for ease this way, seeing that so many dangers accompany it, especially since I could direct you to get what you desire without these dangers that you will meet if you continue in this way, if only you had patience to listen to me. Besides, Worldly Wise Man continued, I will add that instead of those dangers you will meet with much safety, friendship, and contentment. Sir, said Christian hopefully, I pray open this secret to me. Worldly Wise Man proceeded, In yonder village, Morality, there lives a gentleman whose name is Legality, a very judicious man, a man of very good reputation. He has skill to help men off with such burdens as yours. To my knowledge, he has done a great deal of good in this way. Yes, and besides, he has skill to cure those who are somewhat crazed in their wits with their burdens. To him, as I said, you may go and be helped very quickly. His house is not quite a mile from here, and if he is not at home, he has a son whose name is Civility, who can help you quite as well as the old gentleman himself. There you may be eased of your burden, and if you don't feel like going back to your former home, as indeed I would not wish you to do, you may send for your wife and children and find a home in this village at a reasonable rate. Provision there is cheap and good. What will make your own life even more happy is that in this village you are sure to be living among honest neighbors, in credit and good fashion. Christian was confused by this speech. Presently he concluded, If what this gentleman has said is true, my wisest course is to take his advice. With that he said, Sir, which is the way to this honest man's house? Do you see that high hill over there? Yes, very well. By that hill you must go, said Worldly Wise Man, and the first house you come to is his. So Christian turned out of his way to go to Mr. Legality's house for help. But behold, when he was very close to the hill, it seemed so high, and the side next to him seemed to hang over the road in such a dangerous way, that Christian was afraid to venture farther, lest the hill should fall on his head. So he stood still, not knowing what to do. His burden, too, seemed even heavier than before. There came also flashes of lightning out of the hill, so that Christian was afraid he would be burnt, and he began to sweat and tremble with fear. This book is continued at this point on the other side of this cassette.